Thanks a lot, Dr. Gorriz. Nice to see you again after our meeting in Dalian. Since we only have 15 minutes, let's get right to it. We were just told we're supposed to set a tone for this money conference in the next 3 days. So, as they said, no pressure at all. You are the Chief Information Officer and Head of Operations at Standard Chartered. Could you tell us a little bit about what's happening in the traditional banking world these days, and what a CIO with a lot of tech and industrial background like yourself is doing there right now?
Absolutely, sure. So let's look at the banking, and if you look at the banking space, you should remember the number 5, why 5? Because 500 years the banks were invented. At least the longest standing bank there is about 500 years old. 50 years ago we introduced the computers, mainly in the back end. So we took all the ledgers, all the books we had, and put it into mainframe and other kind of computers. The third 5 is actually 5 years ago. More or less 5 years ago, the mobile banking came into play because with the distribution of mobile phones, and now virtually everybody in the world has a mobile phone. So at that point in time, banking really changed dramatically, because what was designed from the inside out so far now has to be seen from the other way, in order to be designed from the outside in. So with this little smartphone in your hand, the interface to banks have changed dramatically. So in the past, the banks were a place when you wanted to bank somewhere, you had to go somewhere in a place, in a retail branch or something like this. Now, if you want to bank, you have something in your hand, you do it. So if you look at this concept, it's quite powerful, because in the past, the trust in a bank was built on the personal relationship to your relationship manager, to the people in the bank you knew. But now the trust has evolved in this mobile era into a series of fulfilled expectations. You have the expectation that my services I'm asking for the bank, they are done within 5 seconds. And actually, if I can fulfill these expectations, then obviously I have a trust in the brand, and I have a trust in the bank. So banks have to learn it's about these trust in the customer has to transform from a person into the fulfillment of their expectations. Right. So as a CIO, the title says Chief Information Officer. I'm the master, actually with a lot of help from my people, obviously, of quite a number of computers. And on top of it, I'm also head of operations. So if some human intervention is needed, they report it to me. So positively spoken, all the things which magically happen in a bank go through my shop. More on a lighter note, if something breaks, you can call me, because I'm probably the cause for the evil.
Right. You were talking about expectations. From a customer expectation point of view, the expectation these days is actually quite uneven, depending on which market you're talking about. So coming from China myself, I would expect I never have to carry cash or credit card anywhere these days. In Beijing, with this phone, I can do anything. I go around, travel around the city, do all kinds of meetings and shopping. I don't need anything else. But in markets like the markets you are more familiar with, Hong Kong and Singapore and elsewhere, the expectation is probably not quite there yet. So how do you manage this gap of customer expectations between different markets, all these markets you're in?
This is absolutely a true observation. China has really leapfrogged the development, and now you can do virtually anything cashless. But the picture is actually a little bit broader than you just painted. Yesterday in Singapore, we introduced Pay Now, which is the answer of WeChat Pay, because Pay Now is a network that you can do peer-to-peer and peer-to-merchant pay only by the use of your mobile number or your national identity. So this is exactly the same concept, and trends into the payless society, the cashless society. And beside that, there are more and more trends in other countries where, for example, with the help of digital identities, you make banking more convenient. India has paved the way with Aadhaar, a digital
Right.
identity, where the government has built a registry for your data. And actually now, with an Aadhaar, you can open a bank account. The data is transferred into the bank's premises, and all the data, virtually all the data, is there. Same thing happened in Singapore with MyInfo, where Standard Chartered participated in the first batch of banks to do this.
Right. So in the setting of a tech conference like these, people usually talk about disrupting traditional industries. And especially when it comes to fintech, often people talk about disrupting traditional established banks. So in this kind of context, you guys often come up as the victim, as the story of yesterday. But what are you doing right now to actually keep yourself in the picture and also to keep being competitive?
Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, the change within the banking has never been that fast or that speedy as it is today. So our concept is that we change the way we introduce new solutions and go more into an exploratory phase. So we have a lot of sandboxes, or actually what we did, we founded a little lab. We call it Accelerator for excellence and acceleration.
Right.
And we invite outside companies to help us integrate their solutions into our banking environment. So we do a couple of competitions. In these competitions, we invite people to show their solutions, and then we pick some of them and take them inside our premises. For example, here in Hong Kong, we did the supercharger. So we were one of the founding members here. The second batch has just been running a couple of months ago, and two of these companies are now invited to do a test, proof of concept, in our bank, and let's see whether this is successful. So it's merely, on the one hand side, there is this technology which you need to enhance your user experience and to improve the service. But moreover, it's the way how you act, how you do these solutions, design these solutions. And that definitely has changed in the banking environment. While in the past there was a lot of waterfall development, so people were specifying something, then a couple of months or even a year later, this was then set into production. We all embraced agile development, and this is the new norm in banks. So that's the same development methodology which in all fintech companies are used. So when you combine the strengths of smaller companies who are very nimble and talented with the experience of the bank, who have actually the customer base and also the international network to deploy these solutions, then you come to greater customer service.
Right. Obviously, these experimental steps seem to be quite dramatic for a traditional bank. But when you talk about today's fintech giants, you can never avoid mentioning the names of WeChat and Alibaba and Paytm, all these big players in various markets. These guys are relatively new, yet in terms of size, they're huge. In terms of market capitalization, they're often bigger than banks. And these guys are usually seen as nimbler and more daring to take on risks. So in such an environment, how do you compete with them?
Well, there is still a lot of space for banks in the environment of the big tech giants, the retail customers and the merchants. When you look at the strengths of each of the entities, so the tech giants, they have a user interface, undoubtedly. WeChat, we talk about 800 users, so therefore everybody in China, in mainland China, has a WeChat account. But obviously, how do you connect these capabilities? How do you connect these customers to merchants, to companies? So here the bank is playing a role. For example, we have been teaming up with Tencent to establish an e-commerce solution which enables small and mid-sized enterprises to get money or deal with the Tencent webpage and then obviously get the money in their account. Or here in Hong Kong, we have linked our retail account to the Alipay Hong Kong solution wallet. So what we are doing, we are combining the strengths of both parties into, a good outcome for the end users.
Right. Just now in the backstage, we also talked about these recent partnerships seem to be pioneered by the Chinese government between Chinese tech giants and major Chinese state-owned banks. There have been 4 or 5 such marriages, which seem to be hastily put together within a very short period of time. What's your take on what's happening between the banks and the tech giants?
Well, it's interesting to observe that space. While the tech giants were grabbing a lot of land in the past years, so this announcement came a little bit surprisingly to many of us, that they are kind of, I wouldn't say forced, but they're forged into a relationship, the tech giants and the big state-owned bank. So my assumption is that, well, the government wants to combine the strengths. I mean, banks traditionally have a lot of knowledge about risk management, about regulation, about dealing with customer on a more individual basis, while the tech giants have the technical capability and the interface to the end user. So if you pull this together, and I think this was a plot behind the idea of forging these alliances between the state-owned banks and the large tech companies in China. So if you go along that line, I think this makes a better offering for the end users as such.
Right. Later on today, on the same stage, we're also having a conversation with a senior executive from Tencent Pay. As you just mentioned, as Chinese tech giants like Tencent and Alibaba try to break out into the international markets, they're having a lot of difficulty. And this is where major international banks like yourselves could come in some kind of advantage. Yet, to many people, to many observers, the tech giants are not really sincerely looking at partnerships. They're only working with you guys for now to help them overcome some obstacles they're having. But in the end, they want to take everything. They want to take your lunch and your dinner. What's your observation on that?
Well, it's hard to predict the future. The fact that I'm working for Standard Chartered is that I'm still confident that there will be a place for a bank. So our concept of banking in the future is a digital bank with a human touch. So undoubtedly, everything what the user wants to do in the regular basis on a day-to-day thing, this has to be done digitally. I mean, there's no choice in that one. But when you look at the 4 basic banking services customers are looking for, it's storing money, it's transferring money, lending money, and it's creating your wealth. So in your lifetime, there will be some moments where you really want to talk to a person because you are insecure, and all the chatbots and all the websites and all this kind of stuff doesn't give you the right answer, or you just want to have a warm feeling to talk to somebody, and then the banks are there. So if you manage to bring all the knowledge, all the wisdom of the banks to that moment of truth, then there will be banks around in the next 500 years. I'm sure about that one.
That ultimate face-to-face interaction, the presence of a wise-looking banker dressed in a 3-piece, is that your final advantage?
I think so. So when you think about a merchant or even large company who wants to go to Asia, I was just talking to European companies who want to conquer the Asian markets. I mean, honestly, based in Europe or based in the US, they are overwhelmed by the variety and by the complexity of Asia in its totality. So therefore, they talk to us because they want to have us to help them organize their collections. They want to help them organize their cash in the different countries with all the capital restrictions, all the things around. So at the end, it's really good to put a face to these services, to put a face to the whole offering we are giving, and then last but not least, it's good to have somebody to talk to if things go right or sometimes things go wrong.
Right. As you mentioned, it's very hard to predict the future. But could you give us your best effort at envisioning the financial world in 5 years' time? Where will the major banks be? Where will today's tech giants be in terms of relative size and strength?
When you look about the banking space, you can observe that most parts of the bank are fully overbanked. I mean, we have more than, I think the latest count was about 16,000 banks, and many of them are in the western part. So what I see, obviously, is a major consolidation of banks all over the places, which has been taking place over the last couple of years. On top of it, I will see that these banks will survive who follow that concept of the full digitalization, but then with a true human environment and human touch. So therefore, I think the tech giants will recognize that only offering digital services which go beyond just basic transactional stuff is hard.
Right.
You know? And banks actually will recognize if they don't fully embark on the digital train, they are lost. So somewhere in the middle, I think we will meet, and I foresee more ventures, more collaboration between these two entities than competition.
Great. Looks like we're out of time. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.